Hello there, everybody from Year 5. It's reading time again this week. Last week we read through the chapter. We'd had the bit where Eric and George had got into trouble the week before, and then when George got back through the portal without Eric, he'd gone looking for the book that Eric had told him to look for. He'd found that book, and he'd also, right at the end of the last chapter, found the notes that Eric was making in there that were sort of child-friendly, the notes that he'd made to try and help George and Annie. So we're going to pick it up this week. George had just started to read those notes when we left it last time. It's going to be ever so slightly different this time. So normally you see me sat here reading the book to you from this angle. There's quite a lot of information in the chapter that we're going to read this week because it's that explanation about the black hole that Eric had left for George. And so what's going to happen is it's going to change in a moment and the information is going to come up on screen so you can see the pages, because in order to follow it clearly and to have a go at the questions, I think you're going to need to be able to see the information, and then you can pause the video and you can stop and look back at the information and read it more like we do in class normally. It's not normally as much of an issue when we're just kind of listening to the story, but for trying to pick out really key bits of information this week, I think you're going to need that. So it's going to come through in a moment on the screen and I'll read it, and then your questions will be at the end there. So as usual, hope you have a good go at those, and we'll try and see if we can make that work for us as we do it now. Okay, enjoy. Chapter 26. My difficult book made simple for Annie and George, version 3. It began. What you need to know about black holes. Section 1. What is a black hole? Section 2. How is a black hole made? Section 3. How do you see a black hole? Section 4. Falling into a black hole. And Section 5. Getting out of a black hole. Section 1. What is a black hole? A black hole is a region where gravity is so strong that any light that tries to escape gets dragged back. Because nothing can travel faster than light, everything else will get dragged back too. So you can fall into a black hole and never get out again. A black hole has always been thought of as the ultimate prison from which there is no escape. Falling into a black hole is like falling over Niagara Falls. There's no way of getting back the same way you came. The edge of a black hole is called the horizon. It is like the edge of a waterfall. If you are above the edge, you can get away if you paddle fast enough. But once you pass the edge, you are doomed. As more things fall into a black hole, it gets bigger, and the horizon moves further out. It's like feeding a pig. The more you feed it, the larger it gets. Section 2. How is a black hole made? To make a black hole, you need to squash a very large amount of matter into a very small space. Then the pull of gravity will be so strong that the light will be dragged back, unable to escape. One way black holes are formed is when stars that have burned up their fuel explode like giant hydrogen bombs called supernovas. The explosion will drive off the outer layers of the star in a great expanding shell of gas, and it will push the central regions inwards. If the star is more than a few times the size of our sun, a black hole will form. Much larger black holes are formed inside clusters and in the centre of galaxies. These regions will contain black holes and neutron stars, as well as ordinary stars. Collisions between black holes and the other objects will produce a growing black hole that swallows anything that comes too near it. Our own galaxy, the Milky Way, has at its centre a black hole 7 million times the mass of our Sun. This is one of the information pages that we find throughout the book, giving us those extra explanations about some of the complicated science going on and being mentioned in the story. I won't go through and read every part of this. What I would suggest is that if you'd like to find out more about a neutron star, you simply pause the video at this point or when I finish speaking here and then just have a quick read of this. Don't panic too much if you didn't understand all the science in there. I'm not sure that even I do. It's very, very complicated, but it could be a good discussion, perhaps to have with an adult or an older brother or sister, something like that at home. So like I said, if you want to look at that more, press pause and have a quick read of that, either now or at the end when we've finished the rest of the chapter. Section 3. How can you see a black hole? Well, the answer is you can't, because no light can get out of a black hole. It's like looking for a black cat in a black cellar. But you can detect a black hole by the way its gravity pulls on other things. We see stars that are orbiting something we can't see, but which we know can only be a black hole. We also see disks of gas and dust rotating about a central object that we can't see, but again which we know can only be a black hole. Section 4. Falling into a black hole. You can fall into a black hole just as you can fall into the sun. If you fall in feet first, your feet will be nearer to the black hole than your head and will be pulled harder by the gravity of the black hole. So you will be stretched out lengthwise and squashed in sideways. This stretching and squeezing is weaker the bigger the black hole is. If you fall into a black hole made by a star only a few times the size of our sun, you will be torn apart and made into spaghetti before you even reach the black hole. But if you fall into a much bigger black hole, you will pass the horizon, the edge of the black hole, the point of no return, without noticing anything peculiar. However, someone watching you fall in from a distance will never actually see you cross the horizon because gravity warps time and space near a black hole. To them, you will appear to slow down as you approach the horizon and get dimmer and dimmer. You get dimmer because the light you send out takes longer and longer to get away from the black hole. So if you cross the horizon at 11 o'clock, according to your wristwatch, somebody looking at you would see the watch slow down and never quite reach 11 o'clock. And then section 5, getting out of a black hole. People used to think nothing could ever get out of a black hole. After all, that's why they were called black holes. Anything that fell into a black hole was thought to be lost and gone forever. Black holes would last until end of time. They were eternal prisons from which there was no hope of escape. But then it was discovered that this picture wasn't quite right. Tiny fluctuations in space and time meant that black holes couldn't be the perfect traps they were once thought. Instead, they would slowly leak particles in the form of Hawking radiation. The rate of leakage is slower the bigger the black hole is. The Hawking radiation would cause black holes to gradually evaporate. The rate of evaporation will be very slow at first, but will speed up as the black hole gets smaller. Eventually, after billions and billions of years, the black hole will disappear. So black holes aren't eternal prisons after all. But what about their prisoners, the things that made the black hole or that fell in later? They will be recycled into energy and particles. But if you examine what comes out of the black hole very carefully, you can reconstruct what was inside. So the memory of what falls into a black hole is not lost forever, just for a very long time. You can get out of a black hole. And then finally, here are your questions, which should also be available in your booklets that you'll be getting, but here they are in the video as well. just to give you a bit of a reminder. So number 1, what is the edge of a black hole called? Number 2, what is a supernova? Question 3, how big is the black hole at the centre of our Milky Way? Question 4, how do you know a black hole is there if you can't see it? And then finally, question 5, do you think George will understand enough of Eric's book to be able to rescue him? And at the bottom there, as always, it says, when answering your questions, don't forget to P. Point, evidence, and explain. You all know just how much I try and hammer that point home about how we construct a good answer to one of these questions. Okay? So best of luck with those questions. Have a good go and see how you get on before we continue the story next week. Bye for now.